welcome to the Energy Realities podcast with David Blackman in Texas. Oh no, he's not in Texas today. Where are you today, David?
I'm in a very dark hotel room in Las Vegas, Nevada. So it's very early and the lighting isn't good. So I look like a ghost, but that's okay.
No, you look just fine. And we have Tammy Nemeth in the UK.
Hi.
Yeah, I see your lights are still on. What's the outlook for blackouts in the UK?
Good question. I don't know. It's a little bit breezy today, so hopefully the power will stay on.
Because all those wind turbines will be
All
turning.
the wind turbines.
Great. And Stu Turley in where are you, Stu?
I'm in Abilene. You gotta love a good Texas time. So
What's the weather
I like it. I like Texas. Yep. You get to see all the windmills as you drive into Abilene, and the Stargate, the big data center coming in with its own power plant that would power 90,000 homes. That's natural gas. It's an amazing amount of construction going on in Abilene.
Yeah, you got that nuclear plant going on online on Abilene Christian University campus, that small nuke. So yeah, lots shaking in Abilene.
Well done. But today we're talking about big oil and mergers and acquisitions, and more specifically about one potential mega merger between BP and Shell. And I'd like to start by saying that, the first rumors, reports, but I'm calling them rumors because you can't trust the mainstream media, about BP turning into a takeover target sometime towards the end of last year after Bernard Looney resigned in disgrace, and everyone realized what a losing bet the transition was for BP, and then these reports began to come out more and more frequently, and now we have reports that Shell is actually studying an acquisition of BP, and it's not just Shell. A few other companies are also, doing the numbers on BP. David, what do you think about all this?
Well, and the numbers for BP just have gotten so much smaller now than before the Macondo blowout in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. Its market cap is less than half of Shell's now. At the time of the Macondo blowout, they were roughly the same size company. Rumors about Shell and BP merging have been a frequent thing for a long, long time. I worked at Shell 20 years ago, and rumors were rampant then that there was an imminent merger between the two companies, with Shell being the surviving company. That didn't happen. Things changed. Economics of it changed, and it didn't go through. But I was told at that time that, these two companies have been sniffing around each other for a century. So it really, since shortly after they were both founded. And there's a lot of ins and outs to merger of that size. But when you have one company that is pretty healthy financial shape, which is Shell, and another that is pretty financially distressed at this point, at least as far as their major investors and board of directors is concerned, in BP, the rumors become stronger. And apparently there's some reality to it, or you wouldn't have so many in the British media running with the story now. And it makes some kind of sense. They're both European companies. They both have to deal with the windfall profit tax levied by the British government now, and a lot of heavy restrictions on the way they do business in the UK. And so trying to get bigger so you can take advantage of economies of scale, and which usually happen in a merger of that size and magnitude. But it's incredibly complex, because in any merger, you have to do due diligence of all the business operations. And when you look at those two companies, they're in dozens of countries. There are fully integrated companies, so they have all different, all manner of assets all the way to retail. from upstream to retail. And that just becomes an incredibly complex thing that will take a long time for the acquiring company to scope out. And then you have the added pressure for BP with this big stake that Elliott, this activist investor group, took in the company's stock in, I guess it was announced in January. And that is, a real factor in all of this, because Elliott is looking for ways to make real radical changes in the way that company is run, and looking for a buyer would be one of those radical things Elliott is probably advocating for. So it wouldn't surprise me a bit if this becomes the time that these two companies end up in a merger. And then, even after that, and we'll talk about it in this show, the potential for one or both of these companies or a merged company to leave the UK entirely and move to the United States. So it's an interesting situation. It's kind of fun to watch if you're not involved in it. If you're in one of these companies, it's no fun at all. And if you're in the upper management, it's an incredibly busy and risky time for them personally. So I wish both these companies the best.
Tammy, do you think a merger would make sense for either or both companies at this point, in light of what David said?
Yeah, I'm glad that David mentioned the Elliott management percentage. I think they purchased 5%. I think that was the number.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when these rumors started coming out, particularly in the last, I would say, few weeks or so, BP shares rose. So it's like, their shares weren't doing so well. It was kind of low. And then all these talks about mergers, somehow that increased their share price. And, it was, I think, about 18 months ago, and Chevron name was bandied about as potentially looking at BP. The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, or ADNOC, was also in the rumor mill of considering a potential takeover. And if you look at, BP's operations globally, they have a lot in the Middle East and, a big chunk in the UK, a bunch in the Gulf of America, and some other, but a lot of it is, good assets. And so then it becomes, is it just a matter of the company not having been gauging things properly? And is it a management issue? Was it just poorly run? Does that then make it a good opportunity for a better run company to take it over to gain those assets? I don't know. One of the interesting things in the UK is that BP has invested significantly so far in a carbon capture project that the UK government has really been promoting. And with Elliott management there, I don't know, will they continue with that? Will they be getting some sort of subsidies from the UK government in order to make this happen? It's an interesting time, and I don't know, if prices stay low, will there be this move to consolidate a bunch of different companies? It's a good possibility.
Yes.
And it could very well mean that with all of these new climate rules in the European Union and the UK and everything, maybe they would be better off. They might make that calculation to move the headquarters to the United States, or a jurisdiction that doesn't have to do all of this different sort of climate accounting. So time will tell. It's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Stu, will they move to the US?
If I was running it, I would be out of the UK in about 15 minutes. This is absolutely hilarious when you sit back and look at the windfall profit taxes. In 2022, Shell paid 178 million pounds in the UK windfall taxes. That's robbery for profits when you're sitting there trying to take a look. They've also already paid their normal taxes. I mean, the billions that they normally pay, that's above and beyond that. So when you're sitting there thinking as a business owner, looking at the bottom line, I'm going to work to give 70% of my profits to the UK government. I think I'd be out of there in about, like I said, 15 minutes. So I think we're going to see actually BP move to the US first to make it more attractive, because if it moves to the US and is listed in the US stock exchange, all of a sudden ExxonMobil becomes interested, or Chevron, or other avenues, and it could open it up for that area. But this brings up a larger question that I want to put this back to you all. And that is, based on the incompetence of the UK management in energy, this is a frightening aspect, because I actually wrote an article. What would it take for the UK grid to not have a Spain power outage? And I was shocked by the amount of research that came back and the billions of dollars, and the glooming look for the UK grid is not good. So when you have energy policies in the UK and taxing going on like that, as a oil and gas executive, I would move out now, because I would make more money if Chevron or ExxonMobil bought me in the US rather than wait for Shell to buy me.
I think the name of
Personal
Exxon
opinion.
was among those doing the numbers.
Who was?
Do what?
Exxon, I think, was one of the
Exxon was?
companies that were doing the numbers on BP.
Yeah, that
So
doesn't
that's
surprise me. Yeah. Because, you know, in this low price environment, there's already a lot of talk about a ramp up in new deals related to Permian Basin producers. But the problem there is that the companies that really wanted to be sold have mostly been sold. There's not a lot of big prospects. I mean, independents, so many of the independent producers, the big ones like Noble and Anadarko, have already been gobbled up. But you still have Devon Energy out there. You still have Diamondback Energy, but those two companies, are not necessarily for sale at this point. They're both wildly profitable and very successful, and may not be interested in being bought. And so that makes it a takeover a lot harder. So ExxonMobil, with so much cash on there, you talk about an oil company that's in a great financial position to move on acquisitions. I mean, they've just been piling up cash for forever, and have had record profits in, what was it, 2023? I think they had all-time record profits and still had strong profits in a lower price environment last year. So it wouldn't surprise me a bit if they're looking at a big acquisition like BP.
and they already did one mega deal.
Yes, yeah, with Pioneer Natural Resources. And
Yeah.
of course, they're still absorbing and rationalizing that. That was a $52 billion buy out, $56 billion, and BP's market cap right now is somewhere in the $90 billion range, which makes it, again, half the size of Shell and significantly smaller than ConocoPhillips. People don't realize ConocoPhillips is much bigger in terms of market cap than BP is. So it's still out there too.
Let me go through some of these synergies, because BP has over 700 leases in the Gulf of America. America is the way we say it here in Texas, America. And you have 700 leases there. They have the Thunder Horse, which is outside of New Orleans in 6,050 feet of water. They have Atlantis, Mad Dog 2. They are also up in Alaska and in Canada. There is a lot of synergies for BP to be an American company. But they also have Trinidad and Tobago, Brazil, Mexico. But the North Sea, they do also have a lot of the things up in there. And quite honestly, there's a lot of talk of oil and gas exploration companies wanting to leave the North Sea because of the UK's management. And there's no reason to do business in the North Sea. So again, you want to go sell your product where it's wanted. It's very much like New York. Why would you want to do business in New York as an oil and gas company when they're going to be lawfaring you to death?
Yeah.
And so lawfaring you to death is the same thing I would say as a oil and gas company. Why would you want to do business there?
Well, companies have always wanted to have an office there. You know, Shell and BP and all these big oil companies maintain strong office presence in New York, because it's the financial centers where all the investors and banks are, and so that's the reason why. But very few of those companies, in fact, I can't think of one that's actually headquartered in New York City. They're all headquartered in much friendlier states like Texas. You know, if they're a U.S. company, and Houston in particular. So, but yeah, you do keep an office.
There's more financial. Houston is becoming the financial center, and people are moving out of New York because of this is an interesting comment from Richard Branart. UK North Sea is the Dead Sea now.
Well, it's not quite that, but it's certainly limping.
But they're
Yeah,
trying.
for sure.
But there's
Wasn't
an
that the
interesting
Princess
point
Bride? Oh no, that was
about BP. I was just checking about BP's stake in Rosneft, which it quit in 2022. But I see now that it has an option to return to it. And I don't know if you remember, but Rosneft had started doing a huge new oil and gas development in Eastern Siberia, where the new fields are, the undeveloped fields. And JP Morgan Cazenove recently apparently upgraded BP stock on the possibility of a ceasefire, an end of the war, end to the sanctions, which would allow BP to return to Russia. This could be, a sort of an incentive in a world where oil demand is dying, and we're going to be oil and gas free in a few short years. But
oh, mercy.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about Russia, because I was thinking about that, how, all the European companies or whatever had pulled out in the wake of the Russian attack on Ukraine. And BP has this mixed history in Russia, where they have put a lot of investment in there, and then things get nationalized, or they sell, or things are expropriated or whatever. But I also wanted to just clarify that my understanding is that BP exited Alaska, that they sold their
That's right.
stake
They did.
to Hillcorp or something.
Hillcorp, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought they exited Canada, but apparently Stu says they still have assets there.
They have one, which is Bay du Nord, which is on the East Coast. It's an offshore field there. But they did exit most of the other things that they had in Western Canada. So they have one offshore. I don't know if it's been developed yet. There's lots of talk about it. It got expedited approvals. Can't get anything built on land, but somehow off the coast of Newfoundland, there was an accelerated approval process. The fact that there was a Liberal cabinet minister who was from that region, I'm sure had nothing to do with it.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Perish the
As
thought.
these things go. Perish the thought.
Yeah, they also sold a bunch of their most, if not all of their Northwest New Mexico stuff to Hillcorp as well. They used to be a big producer. People where we remember, veterans of the oil and gas industry like me will remember that BP bought out Amoco, which was operating thousands of wells in the San Juan Basin of Northwest New Mexico, huge natural gas producing region for a long time. And BP sold that to Hilcorp as well several years ago. BP's, they've had hard times in the United States. Really, they have had a lot of safety related issues even before the Macondo disaster. What's the other name people call it? Something Horizon.
Deepwater Horizon.
Yeah, Deepwater Horizon. That's the more common name. I've always called it Macondo, but Deepwater Horizon. They had a major pipeline leak on the North Slope on their Alaska operations back in like 2007 timeframe. They'd had an enormous explosion that killed several people, I think 8 people, at the refinery. I believe it was the one they bought from Amoco, located outside of Houston, a little while later. And then the Macondo thing happened. And, that company was hit with something like $80 billion in fines and penalty by the federal government alone due to the Macondo spill. And the cleanup operations after that cost it tens of billions more. And that is still, the company really still hasn't fully recovered, from a hit like that. And then, I mean, somebody mentioned their adventures into green energy under Looney were just loony investments and not profitable. And, he was there for 4 years and almost just ran the company completely, and onto the beach. And luckily they ran him off after that scandal. And the new guy has been, he's been making changes, but it's such a hard process to do and takes a while. And so now you have this activist investor coming into this already distressed company. And it's a really difficult, it's hard to see, to me, just as an outside observer. It's really hard for me to see how this company survives in its current form without really major changes through the end of this year. It's just not a stable situation.
Don't you think, David, that listing in the U.S. stock exchange would make it more viable, or the stock price more attractive for folks, so that you'd have multiple buyers?
I mean, they're trading.
I understand, but if they move their headquarters to Texas, it would make them worth more.
Well, it would, and it's such a more attractive tax environment in the United States and other general business regulatory environment than it is in the UK. And it's, as much as we complained about the 4 years of Biden, still as bad as it got under Biden, it's still a far more attractive business environment than it is in England. And, but what I'm not clear on is whether the British government could extract any penalties for BP leaving the country. And I just don't know if they still have any sorts of, despite the fact that the government doesn't own a position in the company even anymore. I just wonder if there may be some sort of constraints that the government could put on that in terms of penalties and fines for leaving.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics involved in that.
Yeah.
Can you really penalize a company for leaving?
It would depend on what their separation agreement was when the UK gave up its stake in the company.
Okay.
And I just don't know if there's anything like that or not. That would be one thing that could make. And then the other thing you have to think about too is well, so many of BP's employees are there in London, in the UK. How many would be willing to make that move? And these are very senior people, a lot of them. And so there would also be the problem with talent on staff, how much you would lose. I remember a company I worked for, we had 300 people in an office in Denver, and consolidated the Denver operations into our Midland office in the desert of West Texas. And of those 300 people, only about 25 were willing to make that move. And so you had this period of time where you had to rebuild your staff, and that can be very tough when you're talking about, that was just a district operations office. You're talking about the company's headquarters. And if you lose, half your people making a move like that, that can be a really hard thing to manage.
I want to give Sean Strawbridge a shout out. I've interviewed Sean, I believe, 2 or 3 times, and he is just a cool cat. He is absolutely love Sean, and he is now moving LNG around. I have interviewed him last year, I believe, sometime.
Yeah.
And I miss the Texas independents and their entrepreneurial approach to EMP. Perhaps this creates opportunities. I think you are spot on. And I'm not sure who this is, who owns Hibernia offshore in Newfoundland these days. I recall Chevron Canada and Exxon partnered in their first oil back in the late 1990s, but it fell off his radar. I do not know the answer to that. But also the non-op that BP owns currently, they still own 34% of a non-op in Alaska. So they did not sell 100%.
Okay.
Makes sense.
The
last kind of news I have about Hibernia is from like 2016, and it was there'd been lots of different assets being sold or whatever. It was ExxonMobil and I think the Canadian government. I'm not sure. That to me, that seems to be what it is.
I just Googled it. It's Exxon has a third, Chevron has 27%, Suncor 20%.
Okay.
Murphy Oil, Equinor have smaller stakes.
Okay.
What did we ever do without Google? Even though it is a criminal organization, but that's another topic for another.
Yeah. Oh, did we cover everything?
Well, I think we've come to the conclusion that we don't know if anybody's moving or merging, but the environment is certainly receptive to it. I think that's where we've got.
It's very interesting to watch. Yeah, definitely. Especially, as you said, if you have, no stake, no interest in any of the companies involved. Well, shall we move on to the headlines?
I think it brings up a bigger question of energy policies in your government. If incompetence reeks through energy policies, the citizens will pay for it.
Yeah, and the governments will pay for it too, because businesses will leave.
Yes.
And regimes change.
Will decline and regimes will change. Yeah.
That will happen.
I think these were the old stories, Tammy. I hope I got the right ones.
Yes. Okay. So the first one is on the right, and it's Lion Electric, which develops electric school buses.
Oh.
And the Quebec government had invested quite a lot of money, and the federal government in Canada. And so the headline is Quebec will not reinvest in Lion Electric, announces Minister Frechette. And basically Lion Electric is in receivership, and it's looking for someone to bail them out. And I think it was like, I forget how much money, but it was like tens of millions. I thought at one point it was like $140 million that the Quebec government had put in over a period of time for these electric school buses. And so now there's a sort of white knight consortium that says, okay, we will buy Lion Electric, but we need some confirmation that the Quebec government will add more money to keep it afloat, right? So And the Quebec government said, yeah, you know what? I think we've put in enough. And if it's not, if it can't make it, it's not going to do it.
My
Why
goodness.
is the company in receivership?
Oh, good question. I mean, it's electric school buses. And then it turns
That's
out
why,
that
yes.
in Canada, in winter, they're not very reliable.
No.
Who could have seen that coming?
Who could
Nobody.
have
no
saw that
one
one
could.
coming? Where they couldn't keep the heat on because the battery would drain so fast,
Yeah.
and the kids are like freezing. And then sometimes they would just stop working,
Yeah.
in the middle of a route. And it's okay, well, that's not good. So the government, the provincial government had paid for X amount of school buses, a certain number were delivered, and then there were troubles. So, yeah. I thought that was just, and it was sort of related to the data from Ford. How much, David, do you remember how much has Ford lost since 2020 on EVs?
Well, they lost combined in 23 and 24. They lost a combined 10 billion. They lost another 900 and something million in the first quarter of this year. Overall, they've lost somewhere north of $15 billion so far in their
Yeah.
EV division. General Motors has lost tons of money too, but they don't separate their financials in a way that you can really track it. So they chose to try to hide it all rather than be transparent like Ford.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I thought was so interesting, because here Ford, which is an amazing company, by all intents and purposes, can't make a go of electric vehicles. And then here we have this electric school bus company, which also couldn't make a go of it except with lots and lots of government investment. So,
And by the way, Lion has saddled a lot of school districts in the United States with
Yeah.
those, faulty buses that no one knows how to fix now without that company being in business. So all
Yeah.
these school districts are just SOL.
yeah, which is why you had Kamala Harris going around, I love electric school buses, and singing her song, which was
You do a much better imitation of her than I do.
which was funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the other headline I had there was U.S. opposes dangerous anti-fossil fuel policies at global summit. So this was the International Energy Agency at the end, or at some point last year, said they would do an energy security summit in London this year. And so at the end of April, London hosted this 2-day International Energy Agency meeting on energy security. And it was rather amusing to watch Fatty Birol at the meeting, because now suddenly he's like this voice of reason. Well, we can't force renewables on every country, and each jurisdiction has to make the decisions that are right for them. It was just like,
Really?
oh, yeah, it was something. I was like laughing while watching it. And then, of course, Keir Starmer, who's the Prime Minister of the UK, and Ed Miliband, who's the Minister for Net Zero and Energy, they both doubled down. Oh, we need to go with renewable wind and solar batteries faster than ever. We need to double down. And then, the US didn't send Chris Wright. They didn't send anyone, significant. They sent the U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of Energy for International Affairs from the State Department. So, and they're like, we oppose the renewable, focus of the summit. We should be looking at what's, from a security perspective, what's helpful for people, what's helpful for our military, what goes towards strength of an economy. And it's not investing more in wind and solar and batteries. So it was interesting to watch. I did sit through it and watch Fatty Birol twist himself into a knot, which was endlessly amusing.
Well, God bless you for investing that time in something so
Yeah.
tedious.
Doing it for all of us.
So the
Doing it
rest
for
of us
all of you.
don't have to, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And your
Yep.
Substack?
And so you can find me on Substack, the nemethReport.substack.com. And last week I just put a little blurb on there, my predictions for what Mark Carney and the Liberal Party are going to do over the next 4 years. And at least I'm saying this will probably happen within the next 6 to 12 months, but I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I hope so too, because waves don't look.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Extended queue times, plague, wind, and solar. That's from Enverus. That's my first article here. Enverus did a study that shows wind and solar projects being delayed by years in our regional grids from being able to be interconnected into the grid, and it's causes about half the proposed projects that are planned to never be built because they just can't get interconnected. And then many I know in Texas are built years before they're actually interconnected into the grid. And so you end up with these basically startups in the wind and solar business building projects just to take advantage of the subsidies and tax breaks that they're due without ever generating anything. Some of them even go completely out of business before they're interconnected. So this is a growing issue. In the U.S. on all the regional grids, you're going to have a lot of abandoned assets that never do generate electricity, and a lot of proposed startups that milk the government for millions of dollars in subsidies that don't end up being built. And it's just a hell of a racket. It's great work if you can get it. But it's just, the outcome of the Inflation Reduction Act. Yes.
I want to bring up a big thing for us to watch with the Energy Realities podcast, and that is land reclamation. Land reclamation in wind and solar is going to be astronomically a ecological financial disaster in the next decade.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, that's Robert Price has done a wonderful job.
Nobody's talking about it yet.
Yeah. We ought to get Robert on here to talk about that. He's just done a fantastic job of chronicling all that and building real databases related to it, and all the ways that local communities have been fighting back against some of the big ones. And so, we ought to get him back on here. One of Warren Buffett's last big bets is souring. That article was in the Wall Street Journal last week. It relates to Oxy, whose financials have not been performing real well, especially in the softening price environment. And so when we talk about remaining big targets for takeover, if Oxy's financial performance continues to drag, they could end up being a potential takeover target for a company like ExxonMobil. The whole strategy for ExxonMobil and Chevron and Oxy as well in the Permian Basin is to just become bigger and bigger and bigger, so you can turn these operations basically into more of a manufacturing process than any sort of risky exploration process like the oil business used to be. You just one project after another project, they all look identical. They involve exactly the same processes, same people. And it really helps take advantage of all these economies of scale and streamline costs. And so a mega merger between ExxonMobil and Oxy would be something to behold, or even Chevron. But Chevron's, the story doesn't get a lot of notice anymore. But ExxonMobil and Chevron are still involved in this arbitration over Chevron's Hess deal because of Hess's 25% position in the Guyana project that ExxonMobil operates. And that's that's been kind of a drain on Chevron here for over a year now. They're hoping to have it all resolved by the end of this year. But if they can't get that resolved, then Chevron may not be in a position to do a big takeover.
It wouldn't want to. It said so. But they're talking about Oxy. They had a pretty big bet on carbon capture.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And but so does Exxon. I mean, carbon capture, if it works, can be profitable. ExxonMobil firmly believes that, and they've made it profitable throughout the years. Oxy has a direct air capture plant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's very expensive, very nonsensical to me, kind.
Yeah. And so that's a big capital investment bet on something that's, pretty out there, just in terms of whether or not you're going to be able to do that in a profitable way. So maybe that's been a drain on them. And then we had a gain in oil prices. Was this one of mine? I'm not sure this is one of mine. On U.S.-China trade talk optimism. But yeah, we did have a weekly gain in oil prices for the first time in a while. But WTI is still down around $61, which isn't, ideal for the companies that are drilling these really expensive wells. Break-even costs, have, at least according to that survey the Dallas Fed did in the first quarter, are really more up around 65 to 70 now. So it's a tough environment for these pure upstream companies right now with oil prices down where they are. But at least we had a gain, and we may have a significant gain in oil prices today as a result of this announcement that the administration put out about its positive meeting with China on Saturday. I'm not really sure there's a lot of meat on that bone, but it looks like the stock market futures are way up. So we'll see how that goes today.
Well, yeah, I just checked. Brent is up to 66 per barrel. So
yeah, and so WTI is probably still sitting around 61.
No, it's 63 and something.
63. Okay, so that gap is closed. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, that's a little better. Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts, right? Right.
Yeah.
And there I am at blackman.substack.com. Come see me.
Oh, yeah. Two lovely stories. One from the UK, another one from Europe. First story, UK government okays solar PV farm in East Yorkshire. Now, I think Yorkshire is a major farming region, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken, but that's my impression. And they're going to build a solar PV farm there. They have learned no lesson whatsoever from anything that happens anywhere in the world with regard to energy or, energy security. To be honest, I don't remember what the details of the story, but the very fact that it's a big PV farm, by the way.
400 megawatts.
Yeah, it's a huge one. This will take up a lot of land.
Yeah.
That cannot be used for anything else.
Yeah.
It's just stunning how they keep digging that hole that they're dragging the whole country into with them. That's actually a depressing story. But the other one's funny because apparently in Europe now you have actual competition for electricity. You have data centers versus weapons producers.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is not enough electricity to go around and satisfy all consumers, industrial consumers. Isn't this amazing and shocking?
My goodness.
Shocking.
I laughed a lot when I read this story. So they're talking about allocation of energy. Can you imagine data center operators? What would they be doing? They will be bidding against defense contractors.
And what's the next step to that? The next step is rationing by the government of,
Yeah.
of electricity,
Yeah.
which is where they want to go. And we've talked about that for years.
Yeah.
That's where they want to end up.
But they shouldn't want that, because they need the revenues from both the data centers and the weapons manufacturers. They need the money.
Yes.
And they don't,
right.
self-sabotage yet again. I mean, that's has become the specialty of European governments in the West, especially.
Yeah.
They're self-sabotaging at every step.
It's a religious exercise, not a business exercise.
It's pretty interesting.
It's cult thinking.
It's a cult.
Yeah, you don't think rationally at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, can I
You
say
know, it's kind of like Poland is not.
There's
Sorry.
a comment here that says I'm experiencing a curtailment to my electricity usage this morning. I want that LinkedIn user to know you are absolutely correct. I am. I came out here to Las Vegas and picked up the wrong laptop charger to a different laptop than the one I brought with me. And so I'm having to have Amazon deliver me a new charger to this hotel today, hopefully. So, yes, I am experiencing a curtailment in my electricity usage. And this is what it looks like when that happens. So
I figured that person would say you look better, but we'll
I do
just leave that one alone. And then, and Irina, your Substack is wonderful.
Is it? I've been losing subscribers, so I think I've started to repeat myself. But it's Irina Energy at substack.com.
People,
I
get
like
off
it.
your butts and subscribe, people. Come on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh.
All right. And then I put this one out there. I found it very interesting that China approved 10 new reactors. That's going to put them up to 68 reactors. But it was the dollar amount that kind of got my eyeballs peeled. $2.74 billion each. And we had in the United States 2 of them come back online in the Vogel transactions. And those were about $27 billion. So how can we go, you got 2.74 billion each in China. So Secretary Wright has his work cut out for him if we're going to be putting nuclear reactors out like hotcakes at that price point. It ain't going to happen. So, and the only way for us to get to net zero is to go nuclear. So PJM is one of the largest. The other story here is put a warning out that if they've got enough water, planned power going on, if they have a normal summer going on, they'll be fine. I thought this was an interesting story from the standpoint that the amount of natural gas that they're having to put on, and the reason they're retiring some of their coal plants early, even though President Trump is allowing them to stay open. They have people on their board that are wanting them to shut down. So, this one is a energy crisis of board management by PJM. I thought this was pretty interesting. And then this was a fun article that I put out. Can the UK avoid Spain blackouts, or are they doomed? And I was fairly amazed by the amount of money that the UK is spending in, I'm going to call stupid policies. And I did not know how bad it was until I started digging into it. And I'm sorry, Tammy, for bringing this up, but you can blame me. And I absolutely think that they're investing in grid infrastructure, $35 billion investment from 2026 to 2031 to nearly double the energy transport capacity, fast tracking 4 billion pounds in development and prioritizing clean energy. You can't buy this kind of stupid. I mean, well, you can. I just gave you a price for stupid.
Yeah.
So none of the grid frequency is going to work. I hate to say this,
I know.
but buckle up. It's going to get ugly and dark in the UK.
But that's okay, because all that solar they're installing, they're also going to dim the clouds to prevent
Oh,
the
of
sun
course.
from coming down.
Of course,
So,
yeah.
you know, brilliant. If I could add
Governor
something to what you're
DeSantis. Oh, sure.
when you're talking about the UK and for Irina's story, they said the local community doesn't want it because they're like, it's going to wreck the countryside. It's taking land out of production. How are we going to clean this up afterwards or whatever? And so normally these kinds of planning permissions are done at the local level, the council level, but they passed some new law where now the national government can make a determination that this is national infrastructure and can override any of those local authorities. And that's what they did with this project. They said, yeah, okay, we've heard your concerns. We don't think they're so bad. We're pushing ahead anyway because this is infrastructure of national concern. And so, when you talk about the billions that they want to put into all this infrastructure over the next 5 years, this is one component of it where they're just going to run roughshod over what the people want and do what the central planners want. So this is going to be setting the UK up for an interesting situation. I don't know if what they'll do, because the British have tended to be kind of passive about a lot of the different stuff that's going on, except for Extinction Rebellion for some reason. They, chose the wrong thing. But also, your article there about the U.S. largest grid operator, the PJM, I read that article, and what concerned me was the part about demand control. So before, they said there was certain times of the year where citizens had signed up to say, if it's really bad, we'll curtail our use. We will ration ourselves so that the grid will survive and not have a brownout or a blackout or whatever. And they applied to FERC, and it was approved that they can now have demand control all year round. So before it was only at certain times of the year, now it can be any point. At any point in the year, they can toggle this on and people be like, oh, okay, I guess I have to ration myself to make sure there's no blackout or brownout. So I thought that was really interesting in that report.
Yeah. It was, and I did not understand I've been doing a review of the U.S. grid system. We're not looking pretty sporty. We've got ERCOT is good for the next couple of years because of natural gas plants, but David and Robert Bryce have brought up a fantastic point, and that is the number of natural gas turbines are sold out.
Yeah.
So there is a finite amount of natural gas plants that can come back online. And it comes back to my point of why PJM it may be in trouble is because they're retiring some of their coal plants,
Cool.
even though they've got permission to keep them open. So it's like, I'm not sure who this is, but
it's Travis Lynn. His name doesn't appear for some reason. It never does.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird.
Yeah. LinkedIn is weird.
LinkedIn is very weird.
That's why people should go to Substack.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go to Substack.
And then my energy newsbeat Substack is theenergynewsbeat.substack.com, and you can find all these stories on Energy Newsbeat. And I'd like to give a shout out to all the people trying to hack my site. We're at 100,000 people a day on the site, but yet I get 5,000 to 7,000 denial of service attacks. We know who you are, so please stop. You're costing me a lot of money and go away. So anyway, I
want to comment on those attacks, because what's interesting is that if you go to a large language model like Grok and you ask Grok to look at different research, and it will go to the web, right? So you can say, yes, search the internet. if you have defenses on your website, like What's Up With That or some of these other ones, Grok can't access that information. So I asked it a question, it gave me some answer. I'm like, well, can you go to this site and look at that? And it says, I'm trying, I can't get in. And so then it goes to Mother Jones, or it goes to Wikipedia, or it goes to some place that's easily accessible. So, it's interesting that these attacks, when you're protecting yourself from those attacks, you're also preventing the large language models from accessing an alternative viewpoint.
It's
So
exactly
they
why
get
they're
their
attacking you.
information from the Mother Joneses of the internet, which is biased.
Right.
Yeah, it can't think, it can't make, yeah.
So the only way you can then
count fact and fiction and propaganda. It's
Right,
very different.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting when you ask a question and you say, do the research, and it gives you the links. And it's like, well, why are you choosing these links? What about these ones? And then it says it can't access those websites and so on. So got to think about that when you're asking these large language models to be doing research, and it's unable to access alternative research because of those defenses from these nefarious attacks and so on.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know the government agencies that are doing attacks on my site, and it just really is irritating. But I do have I think I have two things. Imagine if you're a UK business or a UK oil company. I think I've got a video of some of the planning sessions going on. So let's go ahead and play that one here. Let me bring this up here. Sorry. These are some of the business meetings going on. Should we move to the U.S. or not? I don't know. What do you think?
Poor guy, he tried so hard.
And poor grandma gets really waxed in this one. But this one, what? How high did he go? Or he go? I'm not sure. Why? It's great art. So, anyway, those are energy policies in action.
Yeah.
Net zero in a nutshell.
Okay, who among you misses Jennifer Granholm and all the comic relief she provided?
Who?
In that context, I miss her. Yeah.
That's the problem with Chris Wright. He doesn't ever say stupid stuff, that we can make fun of. So anyway.
Yeah, but he's positive without being hilarious to laugh at.
Yeah.
Great.
Chris Wright is one cool cat, and he knows that he is a cool cat. That is the oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that one. Speaking of cool cat, this video is really cool, especially when you consider the dog knows that this is not really a house cat. And so here we all are talking about energy policies, and we know what works and what doesn't work. But yet this dog knows this ain't a house cat. Watch his eyes. You got to see his eyes. Look at his eyes. He's going, hey, wait a minute.
To make those rainbows in my mind when I think sometimes I want to spend some time with you. Just the two of us.
That ain't no house.
We can make it if we try.
Oh,
That dog is really worried.
Yeah.
Wait till that bobcat is bigger.
Bobcat once, yeah. You gotta. A baby bobcat are fun for about 3 months, and then they're not fun anymore.
because they
So
grow up.
are you saying that just because you're a windmill, you can get bigger and you're going to get more efficient, or they're just going to be worse?
They're going to be worse, meaner and more destructive.
Okay, any last words?
Jeff.
Will BP and Shell leave the UK? Yes. Okay. Jeff Chestnut with the final word. Thank you, Jeff.
I think so.
Probably they will. Interesting times anyway.
Yes, they should.
If they were smart, I think they would. So,
Stu, sometimes your thought processes are scary from Tom Mumford. That's perfect, Tom. And we all agree with that, by the way.
Yeah.
and by the way, Tom, you ought to live in my mind for about 5 minutes and you'd be really scared.
Let's have a beer someday, Stu.
All right. With that, let's have a fantastic week and we're going to have some serious fun. Have a great time, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to go try to find a charger now.
Good luck.